Hello and welcome, wonder seekers, history buffs, and curious minds. You've tuned into the Unbox, your portal to the past, where we delve into the annals of time to unearth the stories, secrets, and seismic events that have shaped our world. Today, we are embarking on a thrilling journey back to the year 1215, to a muddy meadow called Runnymede, nestled beside the River Thames in England. Here, on the 15th of June, amidst political turmoil and simmering rebellion, a document was sealed, not with wax alone, but with profound implications that would reverberate through centuries, echoing even in our lives today. We are, of course, talking about the Magna Carta, the Great Charter, a document often hailed as the cornerstone of modern democracy and individual rights. Forget dusty textbooks and dry recitations of dates and names. Here at the Unbox, we believe in bringing history to life, in making it pulse and breathe with the passions, conflicts, and human drama that fueled it. So buckle up, because we're about to travel back in time to a world of medieval kings, rebellious barons, clashing swords, and the birth of an idea so revolutionary it would change the course of nations. The idea that even a king is not above the law. To truly understand the significance of the Magna Carta, we need to paint a vivid picture of England in the early 13th century. Imagine a kingdom wrestling under the iron fist of King John, a monarch whose name, even centuries later, conjures images of tyranny and treachery. This wasn't the England of chivalrous knights and fairy tale castles we sometimes romanticize. This was a land simmering with discontent, where the seeds of rebellion were sown in the fertile ground of royal overreach and baronial resentment. King John, often portrayed as the quintessential villain of English history, was the youngest son of the formidable King Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine. Born without the expectation of inheriting the throne, he earned the moniker Lackland as he initially lacked significant landholdings. However, fate and a series of untimely deaths thrust him into the limelight. When his elder brother, Richard the Lionheart, died in 1999, John ascended to the throne, inheriting not only the crown but also a kingdom grappling with financial strain from Richard's extensive crusades and expensive wars. John was, to put it mildly, not universally loved. His reign was marked by a series of disastrous military campaigns, most notably the loss of Normandy to France in 1204. Normandy, a territory that had been linked to the English crown since the Norman conquest of 1066, was a vital source of prestige, resources, and strategic power. Its loss was a devastating blow to English pride and significantly weakened John's position both domestically and internationally. This military humiliation fueled widespread anger and resentment, particularly among the English barons who felt their king had failed them. But military failures were just the tip of the iceberg. King John was also notorious for his ruthless and often arbitrary methods of governance. He was perpetually in need of funds, largely due to his military endeavors and a lavish lifestyle. To replenish his coffers, he resorted to increasingly heavy taxation, often imposed without the consent or consultation of the barons. He levied scutage, a tax paid by knights in lieu of military service, at exorbitant rates and with alarming frequency. He manipulated feudal dues and fines to extract maximum revenue. Widows were forced to pay exorbitant fees to inherit their husbands' estates, and heirs were similarly burdened. John's financial policies were perceived as rapacious and unjust, alienating even those who were traditionally loyal to the crown. Adding fuel to the fire was John's personality. Historical accounts paint a portrait of a suspicious, paranoid, and often cruel ruler. He was known for his volatile temper, his tendency to act impulsively, and his disregard for established customs and legal norms. He often dispensed justice arbitrarily, favoring his cronies and punishing his enemies without due process. Whispers of his tyranny spread throughout the land, further eroding his legitimacy and fueling the growing discontent. Religious tensions also played a significant role in the lead-up to the Magna Carta. In 1205, a dispute erupted between King John and Pope Innocent III over the appointment of the Archbishop of Canterbury, the highest religious office in England. John refused to accept the Pope's chosen candidate, Stephen Langton, leading to a protracted and bitter conflict. In 1208, Pope Innocent placed England under interdict, a severe religious sanction that closed churches, suspended religious services, and placed the spiritual lives of the English people in jeopardy. This interdict lasted for 6 long years, further isolating John and turning public opinion against him. In 1209, the Pope excommunicated John himself, a devastating blow to the king's authority and spiritual standing. To make matters worse, John's conflict with the church also had financial implications. The church owned vast lands and resources in England, and John, ever desperate for funds, seized church properties during the interdict, further antagonizing the clergy and strengthening the opposition to his rule. While he eventually reconciled with the Pope in 1213, accepting Stephen Langton as Archbishop and making significant concessions to the church, the damage was already done. The years of conflict had deeply scarred his relationship with the church and further fueled the perception of him as a tyrannical and unreliable ruler. By 1215, the barons of England had reached their breaking point. They were weary of John's arbitrary rule, his excessive taxation, his military failures, and his disregard for their traditional rights and privileges. Under the leadership of figures like Stephen Langton and prominent barons such as Robert Fitzwalter and William Marshall, they began to organize and demand reforms. These barons, who represented the landed aristocracy of England, were not seeking to overthrow the monarchy entirely. Rather, they aimed to curb the king's unchecked power and ensure that he ruled according to established customs and laws. They sought to protect their own rights and privileges, but in doing so, they inadvertently laid the groundwork for broader concepts of liberty and justice that would benefit all Englishmen, and eventually, people around the world. The barons presented King John with a list of demands, encapsulated in a document known as the Articles of the Barons. This document, drafted in the spring of 1215, outlined their grievances and proposed specific limitations on royal power. It was a bold and unprecedented challenge to the authority of the English monarch, a clear indication that the barons were no longer willing to tolerate John's tyrannical rule. The Articles of the Barons served as the blueprint for the more comprehensive document that would emerge at Runnymede, the Magna Carta. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation. King John, initially defiant and unwilling to compromise, found himself increasingly isolated and facing the prospect of a full-scale rebellion. The barons had organized a formidable army, and they were determined to enforce their demands. Realizing the precariousness of his position, and perhaps sensing the inevitable, John reluctantly agreed to meet with the barons to negotiate. The chosen location for this momentous meeting was Runnymede, a neutral ground that had historically been a place for royal assemblies. June 15th, 1215. Imagine the scene at Runnymede. A vast meadow stretching along the banks of the Thames, buzzing with activity. On one side, King John, surrounded by his royal advisors and a contingent of loyal soldiers, his face likely a mask of resentment and forced compliance. On the other side, the assembled barons, a formidable array of power and determination, accompanied by their knights and retainers. Archbishop Stephen Langton, a pivotal figure in the negotiations, stood as a mediator, representing the church's influence and moral authority. The atmosphere must have been charged with tension. This was not a friendly gathering. It was a high-stakes negotiation, a showdown between a king and his rebellious subjects. For days, the barons and the royal representatives deliberated, debated, and wrestled over the clauses of the charter. The Articles of the Barons formed the basis of the discussions, but the document was expanded, refined, and ultimately transformed into something far more significant. The document that emerged from these negotiations, the Magna Carta, was a lengthy and detailed charter comprising 63 clauses. It addressed a wide range of issues, reflecting the specific grievances of the barons and seeking to address the perceived abuses of royal power. While often romanticized as a grand declaration of universal human rights, it's crucial to understand the Magna Carta in its historical context. It was primarily a feudal document, aimed at protecting the rights and privileges of the barons and the church. It was not initially intended to be a charter of rights for all Englishmen, let alone for humanity as a whole. However, within its clauses lay seeds of ideas that would sprout and blossom into broader concepts of liberty and justice over time. Let's delve into some of the key clauses of the Magna Carta and understand their significance. One of the most famous and enduring clauses is Clause 39, which states, "No free man shall be seized or imprisoned, or stripped of his rights or possessions, or outlawed or exiled, or deprived of his standing in any other way, nor will we proceed with force against him, or send others to do so, except by the lawful judgment of his equals, or by the law of the land." This clause, often considered the cornerstone of due process and fair trial, is a powerful statement against arbitrary arrest and punishment. It establishes the principle that even the king cannot act outside the law. A free man in 1215 primarily referred to nobles and landowners, not the entire population, but the principle enshrined in this clause was revolutionary. It meant that justice should be administered according to established legal procedures, not on the whim of the monarch. The phrase, "lawful judgment of his equals," is often interpreted as an early form of trial by jury, where individuals would be judged by their peers. Law of the land signified established legal principles and customs, limiting the king's ability to create or apply law arbitrarily. Clause 40 further reinforces this principle, stating, "To no one will we sell, to no one deny or delay right or justice." This clause explicitly prohibits bribery and denial or delay of justice, ensuring that the legal system should be accessible and fair to all free men. The Magna Carta also addressed issues of taxation, a major source of contention between the barons and King John. Clause 12, for example, stated that scutage and aid, feudal dues, could only be levied with the general consent of our kingdom, except for the traditional feudal aids, ransom of the king, knighting of his eldest son, and marriage of his eldest daughter. While this clause initially referred to the consent of the barons, it laid the groundwork for the principle of no taxation without representation, a concept that would become central to later struggles for political liberty, particularly in the American Revolution. Other clauses in the Magna Carta addressed a wide range of issues, including the rights of the church, the regulation of trade, the standardization of weights and measures, and the limitations on royal forest laws. Clause 1 guaranteed the liberties of the English Church, a crucial concession to Archbishop Langton and the religious establishment. Clauses 20, 21, and 22 dealt with fines and punishments, aiming to ensure that they were proportionate to the offense and did not deprive individuals of their means of livelihood. Clause 30 prohibited royal officials from taking corn or other provisions without immediate payment, protecting farmers and merchants from arbitrary seizure of their goods. Clause 42 guaranteed the right of free men to leave and re-enter the kingdom, reflecting the importance of trade and travel. The Magna Carta also included mechanisms for its enforcement. Clause 61, known as the Security Clause, was particularly radical. It established a council of 25 barons who were empowered to monitor the king's adherence to the charter. If the king violated the Magna Carta, these barons had the right to petition him to redress the grievance. If the king failed to do so within 40 days, the barons were authorized to distrain and distress us in every way possible, with the support of the whole community of the land, by seizing our castles, lands, possessions, or anything else save only our own person and that of our queen and our children, until redress has been obtained according to their judgment. This clause essentially gave the barons the right to lawfully rebel against the king if he violated the charter, a remarkable limitation on royal authority, and a clear indication of the barons' determination to hold John accountable. On June 15, 1215, King John, faced with overwhelming pressure, affixed his seal to the Magna Carta at Runnymede. It was a momentous occasion, a symbolic victory for the barons and a significant check on royal power. However, the story of the Magna Carta does not end with the signing at Runnymede. In fact, in many ways, it was just the beginning. Immediately after the signing, King John, resentful and unwilling to abide by the constraints of the Magna Carta, sent messengers to Pope Innocent III, seeking to have the charter annulled. Pope Innocent, initially supportive of John and wary of baronial rebellion, obliged. Just weeks after Runnymede, the Pope declared the Magna Carta null and void of all validity forever, condemning it as shameful and demeaning, and forbidding the king to observe it under pain of excommunication. This papal annulment plunged England back into civil war. The barons, having secured the Magna Carta through force and negotiation, were not willing to let it be so easily dismissed. They rebelled again, inviting Prince Louis of France to invade England and take the throne. England descended into chaos and conflict, demonstrating that the Magna Carta, while a significant symbolic achievement, was not immediately effective in establishing lasting peace or fundamentally altering the balance of power. King John died in 1216 amidst the turmoil of the Civil War, leaving the throne to his young son, Henry III. Henry's regents, recognizing the need for stability and reconciliation, reissued a revised version of the Magna Carta in 1216, and again in 1217, and in a more definitive form in 1225. These reissues, while making some concessions to royal authority, reaffirmed the core principles of the Charter and gradually embedded it into English law and political culture. The 1225 version of Magna Carta, issued by Henry III when he reached his majority, is generally considered the definitive version and the one that was subsequently confirmed and reissued by successive monarchs. Over the centuries, the Magna Carta underwent a fascinating evolution. Initially a feudal document concerned with the rights of barons and the church, it gradually came to be interpreted more broadly, as a symbol of fundamental rights and liberties for all Englishmen. Lawyers, judges, and parliamentarians in later centuries reinterpreted its clauses to suit the changing political and social landscape. Clauses originally intended to protect the barons were broadened to protect the rights of commoners. The concept of free man in Clause 39, for example, was expanded to encompass all citizens. The Magna Carta became intertwined with the development of English common law and the rise of Parliament. It was cited in legal cases and parliamentary debates as a foundational document, a testament to the idea that the king was not above the law and that Englishmen possessed fundamental rights that could not be arbitrarily violated. It became a powerful symbol of resistance against royal tyranny and a rallying cry for those seeking to limit the power of the monarchy. In the 17th century, during the tumultuous period of the English Civil War and the struggle between Parliament and the Stuart kings, the Magna Carta experienced a resurgence in prominence. Parliamentarians invoked the Magna Carta to defend their rights and liberties against the perceived absolutist tendencies of the monarchy. Figures like Sir Edward Coke, a prominent lawyer and judge, championed the Magna Carta as a cornerstone of English liberty and argued that it established fundamental principles of due process, habeas corpus, and the rule of law. The Magna Carta became a key weapon in the arsenal of those advocating for parliamentary sovereignty and limitations on royal prerogative. The influence of the Magna Carta extended far beyond the shores of England. When English colonists embarked for North America, they carried with them the principles and ideals embodied in the Great Charter. The Magna Carta became a source of inspiration for the American revolutionaries in their struggle against British rule. The colonists invoked the Magna Carta as evidence of their inherent rights as Englishmen, rights that they believed King George III and the British Parliament were violating. Phrases and concepts from the Magna Carta, such as due process, trial by jury, and no taxation without representation, resonated deeply with the American colonists and became central tenets of their revolutionary ideology. The American Declaration of Independence, the United States Constitution, and the Bill of Rights all bear the unmistakable imprint of the Magna Carta. The Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, for example, which guarantees due process of law and prohibits the government from depriving any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, is directly derived from Clause 39 of the Magna Carta. The Sixth Amendment, guaranteeing the right to a speedy and public trial by jury, also echoes the principles enshrined in the Great Charter. Beyond its direct influence on legal and political systems, the Magna Carta has become a universal symbol of human rights and the rule of law. It represents the idea that all individuals, regardless of their status or power, are subject to the law and entitled to fundamental rights and protections. It has inspired movements for democracy and human rights around the world, serving as a beacon of hope for those struggling against tyranny and oppression. However, it's important to acknowledge that the Magna Carta is not without its complexities and nuances. It was, as we've discussed, a product of its time, a medieval document addressing specific grievances of 13th century barons. It did not envision universal suffrage, gender equality, or the full spectrum of human rights as we understand them today. Its initial focus was on the rights and privileges of a relatively narrow segment of society. Free men, primarily nobles and landowners. Serfs, who constituted the vast majority of the English population in 1215, were largely excluded from its protections. Furthermore, the Magna Carta's practical impact in the immediate aftermath of its signing was limited. As we've seen, it was quickly annulled by the Pope, and England descended into civil war. It took centuries for its principles to be fully realized and incorporated into legal and political systems. The interpretation and application of the Magna Carta have also evolved over time, often shaped by the political and social context of different eras. Despite these nuances and limitations, the Magna Carta remains a profoundly significant document. Its enduring legacy lies not only in its specific clauses, but in the revolutionary principles it enshrined. The limitation of royal power, the rule of law, due process, and the recognition of fundamental rights. It was a crucial step on the long and often arduous journey towards constitutional government, representative democracy, and the protection of individual liberties. The Magna Carta reminds us that the struggle for rights and freedoms is an ongoing process, a constant negotiation between power and liberty. It reminds us that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles, individuals can come together to challenge tyranny and demand a more just and equitable world. The barons at Runnymede, driven by their own self-interests and grievances, inadvertently set in motion forces that would transform the course of history and contribute to the development of principles that we cherish today. So, as we reflect on the events of June 15th, 1215, let us remember the muddy meadow at Runnymede, the clash of wills between King John and the barons, and the document that emerged from that tumultuous encounter. The Magna Carta is more than just a historical artifact. It is a living testament to the power of ideas, the enduring quest for justice, and the ongoing struggle to ensure that even the most powerful are held accountable to the law. It is a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the seeds of liberty can be sown, and that even a king can be made to bow to the law. And that, my friends, is the incredible story of the Magna Carta, unboxed for you here on the Unbox. We hope you found this journey into the past as fascinating as we did. The Magna Carta's legacy continues to shape our world, and understanding its origins and significance is crucial to appreciating the freedoms and rights we enjoy today.